we're about to get started. A very good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the Ole Consulting Monthly PM Roundtable, a topic around the importance of inclusion in celebration of International Women's Day, or International Women's Month. My name is Ade Adeyemi. I'm the CEO at Ole Consulting. If you're joining us for the first time, Ole Consulting is a management consulting firm that specializes in IT professional services in the areas of staffing, training, and project delivery services. Essentially, we connect IT professionals to opportunities within the industry. We also provide training, coaching, mentorship, and employment placement services for individuals that are looking to get into the fields of project management and business analysis. Our mandate for the PM Roundtable is to provide an avenue for our PM and BA community to share information, network, discuss best practices, industry trends, and talk about and provide opportunity for career growth. Essentially, our goal is to raise leaders, and we hope that we certainly hope that today's session will help further the mandate. Today's roundtable, we have a very interesting group of panelists that we have with us today. We'll be talking about the importance of inclusion, women in the workforce, and the importance of inclusion. We have a great group of panelists. They will be introducing themselves. We'll get to hear from each and every one of them. And then we'll have this conversation around what's the importance of inclusion? What is the absence of inclusion? How can we promote inclusion in the workplace? And what sort of challenges have women faced in the past, and how have they thrived over the years? Again, we will get the panelists to share their experience and how they've been able to make the way in their chosen career. So without further ado, we'll get started with some introduction. Our first panelist that we'll be introducing today is Felicia Lekon Salami. Welcome, Felicia.
Thank you. What am I supposed to introduce myself?
Okay, well, I guess I'll, well, thank you for joining us, Felicia. So what we expect to do is perhaps if you can give us some introduction. I know we have your profile on the screen right now. If you can perhaps just give us some introduction, let the audience know who you are, and they can perhaps get a better appreciation for what we have on the call.
Thank you so much. Welcome to everyone on the call. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Felicia Lekon Salami, and I'm Divisional Vice President at Hudson's Bay for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. On the flip side, I'm also the CEO of Milton Food Group, which is a health-conscious snacking company. My experience spans over 20 years in various areas of business, so marketing, operations, finance, hiring, and so many other areas that have become very helpful and useful to me as I develop my business in these days. So I'm hoping to be able to share some of my experience, and then some of the insights I've gained being in the diversity and inclusion space for a few years now. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Felicia. Again, we're going to hear from Felicia. Felicia has a lot to share with us. Thank you again for the introduction. Our next panelist we will be introducing is Jyoti Nair. Welcome, Jyoti.
Thank you, Ade. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jyoti Nair, Senior Manager, Organizational Delivery and Governance at Tangerine Bank. I'm part of the Enablement PMO office at Tangerine, which is basically a metamorphosed version of a traditional PMO. And the value proposition that Enablement Office brings is beyond delivery of projects. I'm a Canadian immigrant who moved to Canada in 2005 and had to pretty much restart my career as a beginner when I came to Canada. I started as a sales operations analyst in Monster Canada, which was an online job board at an entry-level position. And it took me 4 years to get to a level which I would say, based on my career trajectory, was the right position in the Canadian market, where I was overseeing the sales operations division, heading the sales operations division for Monster Canada. From a project management perspective, where my subject matter expertise lies, I started with Scotiabank around 11 years ago, and I've been a project management professional who specializes in IT delivery, in budgeting, and governance. So in my 11 years, I've taken on different project management roles in the organization, Scotiabank and Tangerine, and currently I'm leading the project delivery and governance portfolio at Tangerine. I'm excited to be here today to share some of my experiences and how inclusion has played a very important role in my professional journey. Other than being a PM professional, I'm a mom of a teenage son. We are a family of 3. I'm passionate about fitness and a kickboxing, an avid kickboxer, and a brown belt in Muay Thai. In my spare time, I coach at a local studio and make sure how I'm able to find the time to pursue my passion along with my professional career. And before I wrap up, I am thankful for this opportunity to be here today to share my experiences with all of you and also hear from the other panelists what they have to share. Back to you, Ade.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much, Jyoti. And we're thankful to have you on the call, Jyoti. Jyoti is a regular here at the PM Roundtable. Thank you once again, Jyoti. We're going to go to the next panelist. Our next panelist is Lola Adeyemi. Lola, welcome.
Thanks, Ade, and thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Lola Adeyemi. I am a director for business analysis and mentor coach at Ole Consulting, and also run business operations for Ole Consulting and its sister company, ProInsight. And as well, I also have, like Felicia, a food and beverage company called Itsupa, whereby I have products that are filling a gap in the mainstream grocery stores for African-inspired soups and sauces and other products. And when it comes to filling the gap, we, as well as immigrants and women, there is a gap as well in the industry. And it's been a journey coming to Canada as an international student and, self-educating myself in IT. At the time when I started in business analysis, it wasn't as popular as it is now, but I saw some women, specifically Ade's older sister, who was a project manager, and I thought, oh my God, she's doing so well. I want to be like her. And so I self-taught myself, got coaching from her and other people, and I started my career in business analysis, and I've worked in a lot of the big 5 banks. Most recently, before I moved on to Ole Consulting and also established Itsupa, I was working as a business transformation consultant with the City of Toronto, establishing enterprise-wide projects for the city. And then I moved on to Ole and also running my entrepreneurial and starting my entrepreneurial journey at the same time. So it's been a great journey. I'm excited to share my story and hopefully inspire and influence some other women and male allies here today.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Lola. And Lola here is our senior leadership, part of our leadership group at Ole Consulting, and she does a lot of coaching and mentorship for folks within our community. Thank you so much for the introduction, Lola. Okay, so we will transition to the very exciting conversation. The conversation today is around importance of inclusion in celebration of International Women's Month. We're going to have some interesting conversations around understanding what is inclusion and also trying to understand the concept, the absence of inclusion. Again, we want to understand what sort of practice, we need to put in place to ensure that we're giving people the ability to feel like they belong and they can be themselves and they can operate at their best capacity. So this is very exciting. We will exit the presentation mode at this point. We'll get into the conversation. We'll get to see who's on the call. We'll get to see all the panelists. I guess at this point, we're going to talk to the panelists to get, we're going to get to speak to the panelists and see what's going on. Let's talk about your background. Let's talk about what you have to share as far as your thoughts around the subject matter. To get us started, I'm going to start with you first, Felicia. Felicia, perhaps in your capacity at Hudson Bay, you work as a diversity and inclusion professional. What, in your experience, would you consider, what strategies would you consider important, or what strategies work well to promote inclusion in the workplace?
Yeah, thank you so much. Before I start, or before I forget, Mutai Joyti, that's a passion that my soon-to-be 18-year-old son has. So I guess we will come and connect with you to get some classes in.
Definitely.
So inclusion in the workplace, I mean, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a word that has been thrown around very frequently recently, especially after the incidents of George Floyd. You find that a lot of companies are now invested in that, some as a checklist, some truly committed. So it's always good to find what the difference is. But what I've found is that, either ways, at the end of the day, inclusion in the workplace is an intentional act, because diversity, a lot of people think of diversity and they think of it's just different races, but there are like 9 different dimensions of diversity: the way of thinking, sexual orientation, religion, and all sorts of things come together. At the end of the day, the equity part of it is where you then give access. So, but you can give access but still not include. And that's why out of those 3 letters, inclusion is actually the most important. And it's deliberate and intentional. So you can invite people to a party, but if you bring them to the table and you don't give them an opportunity to speak, you haven't included them. So what I find is that the strategies that work is when leaders within an organization are intentional about holding themselves accountable. And when everyone in the business understands that inclusion is a collective action. So your leader cannot be inclusive to you and you are not inclusive to your peer or to your subordinate. So it becomes a behavior that you have to develop organically within your organization for it to truly work. What are the benefits of inclusion? At the end of the day, it's only when people feel included that they feel safe. It's only when they feel safe that they can bring their best self to work and produce good output, which in turn will drive growth for that business. So there are few strategies that I've practiced myself and that I have seen organizations do. One is the education piece. So educating your people to be able to be all those things that I just said in the last 1 minute. But then also providing the environment, the processes, the policies that allow for that to happen. So that different organizations have different cultures, and one of my favorite saying is that culture will eat strategy for breakfast. So you can have this great strategy in your organization, but if you don't breed the culture that allows it to thrive, then it doesn't thrive. So education is one. Making it a part of day-to-day action is the other, and there's a good example that comes to mind. In my office, my current organization, we practice something called the equity sequence, and this is something that we just recently started practicing, but we've seen a lot of impact stories, and it can lend to strategies that work. It's a sequence of questions that everyone has to ask themselves when they want to take a decision, plan an event, do a project, that allows you to stop and think, who is included, who's not included? Why are we doing this? Is this reaching everybody? What are the power dynamics in the whole of this? And a very good example is there was a group that was filled with a lot of women, and they had a meeting at a particular time. I think it was like 2:45, And 2:45, most women have kids that they need to pick up at school. And they found that this meeting was not very productive until they stepped back and started thinking, who are the people that are included in this meeting? Did they identify it was 75% women? And it was only then that they also identified, how are we doing this? When are we doing it? That they realized it was pick-up time when people had to go to school to pick up their kids. So half of the people on that call every single week were either in the car taking the call on their Zoom, about to tell their child, don't cross the road now, I'm coming down, or something like that. So they weren't participating, they weren't engaged, the meetings were not productive. But when they stopped and said, how do we make this most inclusive? They realized all of these things, moved the meeting 45 minutes before, and then it changed the whole story. It became a more productive thing. So that's the power of intentionally including people. I don't want to take too much of time, but I hope that this kind of like lends to the fact that education, intentionality, accountability, and stopping to see where the opportunities are to deliberately include everyone is will be the strategies that I've found work.
Well, thank you so much for the powerful opening, Felicia. And I do agree. I think education is extremely important. People need to be educated. I think if we are intentional about the approach and to ensure that we're catering for every member of the team or every member of your group, and we understand their circumstances and we understand how to ensure that everyone feel like they belong, everyone feel like they're being their issues or their concerns are being addressed, I think you get a better result as an organization. Thank you so much once again, Felicia. We're going to go next to you, Jyoti. Jyoti, I guess, and I'll say feel free to chime in. We're going to move to another question, but feel free to chime in on the previous question. For you, Jyoti, as a leader working within the financial services industry and as a leader overall, how do you stay mindful of who's at the table and who's missing at the table?
That's a great question. And I think at the end of the day, inclusion starts by self-reflection or self-awareness. It's an activity that starts at the individual level. And then it's basically a recognition of educating yourself, increasing self-awareness, and being aware of your own conscious and unconscious bias. We all have that at some form of or the other way. And as Felicia mentioned, there's so many aspects of it. In many scenarios, educating ourselves where we don't even recognize the different kinds of bias that exist. And unconsciously, we may be, even though it's unintentional, we may be having a bias towards somebody. So how do you make sure that as a leader or in an organization, you are inclusive? And I think it starts with that self-reflection where you're demonstrating a certain behavior and making a conscious effort by, for example, one of the examples I'd like to highlight what Felicia had mentioned. Organizations have certain equity sequences. So that's an indication that whenever you have a standard process, it encourages a consistent mechanism of inclusion. So therefore, there are factors that drive certain decisions, and it's not based on someone's ethnicity or gender. Rather, it's the subject matter expertise, it's the agenda, it's the expected outcome of a particular scenario that drives the required parties on who need to participate. And having a standard process drives a consistent mechanism. And how you can enforce it in terms of action is by doing few things. One of the things which work really well for me, I'll give an example. When I was new to the organization, I was driving an initiative which had an organization-wide impact. So it was an enterprise change initiative to roll out a delivery framework, and I was conducting a gap analysis. So I wanted to make sure that I was inviting the right representatives from all areas who could share their feedback. So what I did was basically, one, I followed a process where I created like a matrix where I identified people in terms of who are the decision makers, who are impacted, who are the influencers, who are the end users. And based on that, I filled in the information and arrived at an invitee list. A second approach I did, this was more a structured approach or formal approach. I followed an informal approach, which worked well as well, is I solicited feedback from individuals who have been with the organization for a while. So seeking out perspectives from different individuals helps you sometimes overcome that unconscious bias that you yourself may not recognize, because the other person helps you cover that unconscious bias. And one other aspect is challenging stereotypes. That awareness and behavior of challenging stereotypes, where if you notice that there is certain behaviors which may be perceived as, even though if they are not intentional, questioning that, seeking more information, and being curious to learn and understand on what you're observing. So all these behaviors, I think, helps you keep a self-check and also drives attention from the people you're interacting with, to make that conscious effort of being inclusive across the board.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much, Jyoti. And I think it's interesting because challenging stereotypes, I think it's something that requires a great deal of courage, a great deal of boldness, and understanding that, hey, wait a minute, can we start asking questions? Because things don't change unless you start asking questions. And people might push back initially, but eventually it will resonate, and eventually people start taking actions. And it's interesting when we're talking about this, and I'm going to go to the next question. We're going to switch gears a little bit from the initial question, which is around the concept of inclusion and how you look at it from a broader perspective. Lola, my question for you, Lola, is around, again, for you, how can men support women in their organization? And now there's a two parts, actually. I'm going to put it. First part is how can men support women in their organization? And the second part is how can women support other women in their organization, Lola? And I'll let Jyoti and Felicia chime in after this, after you speak, Lola. But Lola, if you want to get us started with the two questions.
Okay, thanks, Ade. So I would say that a lot of times even in my tech career and in my food and beverage career, most of the leaders that have supported or sponsored my growth have been men. And the characteristic that I find that is common in those men are they're people who are making a conscious effort and understand that there's actually, not just because I'm a woman and working in male-dominated environments, but also the fact that I'm an immigrant and they're making a conscious effort to make sure that I am heard, to make sure that I am encouraged, and to make sure that I understand my value and I see my value. So I think the way that men can help support the growth of women in their environments is understand that no matter what room you are in today's world, that woman beside you in a cubicle, on a Zoom meeting, is usually a minority in the corporate world. In all the offices, all the environments that I've worked, I'm usually maybe one of 3 women in an environment where there's like 20 plus men. And then I am usually the only Black woman or immigrant woman as well. So it can sometimes be intimidating. I remember when I started my career in IT, and I was the only Black person usually and my role then at TD, I actually had a female boss, and she was a boss. Like, she was amazing. She encouraged me. A lot of times I would find that I felt like what I was producing, I wasn't as confident with what I was producing, but she always told me, wow, your work is incredible. And I think you're doing great. These are the paths that you should take. Oh, I heard you in that meeting. Next time, maybe don't accept the fact that he told you to, he didn't accept your response, because I felt like it was important, but I didn't want to make it seem like I was being, taking your side, but you were on the right path. And, or something like, sometimes she would take my side and tell them, oh no, let Lola speak. So I think the same thing when it comes to men and women is the same thing. If you're a woman that is a leader or a man that is a leader, I think the key thing is just making that conscious effort to realize that that woman in the room with you is a minority, and she needs to be encouraged, and she needs to be supported, to let her know that she's on the right path, and she's gone through a lot to get to where she is. And a lot of us here today in this room on this Zoom and the panelists, we're all immigrants, and first generation immigrants for that matter. And a lot of times we come here with that already immediate feeling that we are sometimes obviously in a new environment where we're not sure how to sometimes speak, how to be confident as women, because the culture where I come from, or where some of us come from, women are seen as subordinate to men. And so we sometimes bring that cultural feeling into the workplace. And the way that I have been inspired is sometimes to see how other women react, other Canadian women or other women who have grown up in different environments, handle certain situations. So I think if you see yourself as somebody who has been through certain barriers, has overcome a lot of them, and you see somebody who is coming up, I think we all have the ability to mentor someone. You don't have to become, reach the heights, Felicia, as a VP or Jyoti. You can still be a mentor to someone, and whether you're a man or a woman, you can be an ally. I think the key thing is making a conscious effort to look in the room and make sure that that woman is being heard. Ask, if nobody remembers to ask the woman in the room a question or her opinion, say, oh, by the way, we haven't asked Felicia's opinion. I would like to hear from her. If there is a submission being made and there's only one woman in the room, and even if her ideas are not necessarily picked, still let her know your idea was fantastic, but these are the reasons why we picked the other person. Like, always encourage, because that woman is making so much effort to be able to be seen and be heard. So I think that those are the key things. I would say making a conscious effort to encourage, to sponsor, and to let that woman be heard. I think our voices being heard gives us confidence and encourages us that we're on the right path, and we're being considered when it comes to decision making. And I think it will go a really long way. So yeah, along with everything that Felicia and Jyoti have said, I think it's just consciously taking action, even when we've said we want to be allies. It's the action of making that conscious effort that will make a difference.
Well, thank you so much, Lola. And I do echo what you're saying, making a conscious effort. And I'll speak from a man's perspective. I think as a man, for men, we need to educate ourselves, and we need to make a conscious effort, because sometimes as men, you might do things and not realize that you're doing those things. And it's important for men to make a conscious effort to educate themselves, to understand ways that they can improve and ways that they can support women, to ensure that they create a space where your personality is not becoming a problem for somebody else. And you said something that's really interesting, Lola, that I want to circle back to, is around the cultural background for women, and especially international women, women of color. How can women, and I know there are a lot of women on the call today, how can women with the background, and I'll let Jyoti and Felicia also chime in here, how can women with a cultural background that may necessarily not put women in a disadvantaged position, or like you said, Lola, make women feel subordinate? How can women overcome those, I guess, those limiting beliefs or limiting, cultural background? I guess maybe Lola, you want to chime in, or maybe I'll let either Felicia or Jyoti, if you guys want to chime in here.
I think, I'm aligned to what Laura said around allyship and advocacy. At the end of the day, what I found is that gender bias is real. I mean, like Jyoti said, there are certain stereotypes that are there. They've not gone away yet. Maybe in 20, 30 years, as we keep this conversation going, they will keep getting smaller. But what I found is that at the end of the day, it's a two-way street. So yes, the bias is there. Yes, the stereotype is there. But I think there's a role for us as women, knowing specifically that we're in the minority, whether it be by race, immigration, or even gender, to speak up for ourselves and find our allies. So when I say find your allies, it's easy for a man in the room to say, I want to be an ally. But where there's that one man, there are three men that have the unconscious bias and don't even realize that they need to do anything extra. So what I've found is that sometimes you will find mentors or advocates or sponsors who will reach out to you or who will lift you up. But then when you don't find, you need to rise up to educate the people around you and then also to ask for support. And asking for support, I'm finding, more and more, either whether it be professional or personal, doesn't necessarily have to always be from someone that is ahead of you. There's something called reverse mentoring. I was speaking to a lady once, and she said she was struggling a lot with her business. And because she kept looking for mentors, people that have owned $1 billion companies, people that have done this. And she was struggling and not finding, and her business was failing. And then one day she stopped and she realized that, guess what? I have mentors all around me, my peers, even people that are younger than me. And then she started deliberately reaching out to learn something new every day. And in 6 months, her business was transformed because she chose to know that her mentors are everybody around her. I can learn from my son. I can learn from Lola. I can learn from Jyoti because they know something that I don't know, and vice versa. So finding that support deliberately where it is not readily available. And I think also women that have gone ahead and maybe in high position have a role to play. So I think it was Lola that said most of the time she finds that maybe she's one in the room. And there's research that shows that, one of one most likely will not be sustained, would leave. One of two, it gets a bit better. One of three, it gets even better. So I think as women, when we find ourselves in a place of position, we should look for opportunities to bring other people in and to lift people up as well, because that's how we start growing that community. And the more we are, the stronger we become, and the more confident we are in seeing that there are people that have done this, and it means that I can also do it, right? So so that's what I would say. At the end of the day, there's a role for mentorship, whether it be up or down or even lateral, but sometimes we have to open our mouths and have a voice as well, and not just fall into the stereotype that, okay, no, women don't do this or women don't do that. Everybody does everything. Like I say, success or goal setting has no color, has no gender. We all have the power to become who we want to be.
Thank you, Felicia. Jyoti, do you care to chime in?
Yes, of course. I think I identify with what Lola mentioned, that coming from a culture where women have not been seen equal to men, we a lot of times have that barrier that we create for ourselves. And I share this from my own experience, because I had something where I lacked judgment in self-assessing on my capabilities. And we typically call it the imposter syndrome. And even though I would be meeting objectives, even though I'm productive, I am doubting. There is self-doubt that does what I'm sharing have value? Is it perceived as valuable, even though it may be deriving certain outcomes? So how do you overcome that? And I think that also is something that I need to, at my end, recognize that and seek help where needed. So not shying away from reaching out and asking for support, or asking for people to be allies. You build relationships. That's from the networks, because I think it's very important for us to go both professionally and personally, to have a close knit of circle of people who stand up for us, who support us, and recognize us and remind us of our capabilities. And I think and that's what allyship is all about. And for me, I recognize that for me to overcome that that self barrier I had to have allies who reminded me of that and with whom I could bounce off my ideas before I presented, which would help me validate that, yes, what I'm sharing is valuable. I should speak up. And there are a lot of scenarios where another thing is courage, right? Courage to being able to, I call it invite yourself to the table. Sometimes you are waiting to be called to share your opinion. But I recognize don't wait to be invited to the table. Speak up. If you have something to share, irrespective of whether it's your place or not, or whether you're being invited, share your perspective, share your opinion. And all these processes help you overcome that self-doubt, and having that allyship build, which is a parallel activity, helps you overcome that journey. And at the end of the day, you reach a point where you recognize that all this has worked for me. It's time for you to pay it forward. When you observe it in your teams and in groups where you are, you make sure that you step up to be an ally. And at a stage of life, you start paying it forward and start prompting people to speak up when you recognize there might be someone holding themselves back. And it's very easy to note that just because you recognize those behaviors because you have gone through them. So being able to call that out and encouraging people, reaching out to people, asking them whether they need help, and being an ally yourself.
Okay, all right. Well,
Ade, if I can just quickly chime in, I love what Jyoti just said, and it's really important to. I find that when I first moved to Canada, I had this. No, not when I first moved to Canada, but even when I moved to Canada, there's that culture shock. But I took it even into like people calling the professor by first name. I'm like, what? We see in our culture, we see our professors as gods, mini gods, basically. But then I took that into the workplace, and I would see a male figure like Felicia, who's a VP or a director, somebody who's like a major figure in the organization, and I would not want to be seen. I'm like, I'm just here. I'm just this Black woman. Don't see me. I'm just doing my work. I don't want to be noticed, because I feel like with that imposter syndrome coming here, I'm like, I just want to do my job and go home. Because I'm afraid that if I'm noticed, then I will be questioned. And why is she here? Is she eligible to be here? Is she valuable? And at that time, I hadn't realized my value. And even though I was getting promoted and getting better at my job, I still didn't, that subconscious bias that I had from myself affected me even being confident. And so I wasn't being noticed. And so I would see people who probably didn't have as much value as I have getting promoted. And I'll be like, oh, is it because I'm Black, they're not promoting me? Not necessarily. It's because I'm Black that I am demoting myself because I am not getting myself noticed. And if you are not noticed, then you're not recognized. And if you're not recognized, you're not going to be promoted. How can you be in the back of the room and want to get noticed by a VP or the president of the company? If the president of the company is walking by, are you saying, hello, nice to meet you, I'm Lola, this is what I do in the organization, this is what I do for your team? And I see people like that make conversations. A lot of Canadians do that, and I'm in awe, and I'm like, wow, she's talking to the VP, how confident, how bold of her. And I think sometimes it's that cultural thing as well, where we see those that are leaders as that figure that we shouldn't just approach. And I love that idea where we come in Canada now, where it's like even the VP is in a cubicle, not necessarily in an office that is like, it's closed door. A lot of times I feel like we need to step forward and not wait for the table, like Jyoti said. Make yourself notice, be confident in the value that you're bringing, and don't shy away from raising your hand. Raise your hand as much as you can. And as well, in order to actually find those mentors, use LinkedIn as a tool. A lot of the mentors that I've found in tech and also in CPG have been because I have raised my hand and gotten noticed and spoken out about the challenges that I've had. And people surprisingly are always so happy to help and support. So I think getting noticed, getting yourself noticed, and not just shying away from, creating a space for yourself and not waiting for others to create space for you is really important.
Okay,
And
wow.
I think that's so true, because imposter syndrome, like Joyce said, it's a big deal, and everybody, some way, somehow, at some point in time in their life, goes through it. So it's not something to shy away from. It's something to know that every other person, whether the person is the president today, when they started out, they also had that. But one thing I've learned about imposter syndrome is that there are different things that cause it. So there are like 5 different types of imposters that we can be to ourselves. So there's the perfectionist, there's the person who's a superwoman or a superman, there's the person who is naturally a genius, there's the person who's a soloist, or the person who is an expert. And because we're trying to live to those things in our mind, we are a superwoman because we have multidimensional abilities and we do things, right? But then sometimes you stop and say, well, really, is that me? No, I don't think so. Then am I blowing myself up too much? And that's where the imposter syndrome starts seeping in. So I think an understanding of the fact that 70% of people go through this, first of all, is the first overcome. And then the second is that, am I really assessing myself? If I can do this, I can do it. It doesn't matter who's not doing it or who's doing it. And I think the more we then practice that courage and that confidence, we find then that we overcome it. So, but the beauty in it is when we overcome it, we should realize that the people coming behind us will go through it as well. So let's be able to identify it and help them as well. I always like sharing stories. So there's a lady in a group, and most of the time she's a very brilliant person. When you sit with her one-on-one, she has so many things to share. Then we come to meetings and she's never saying anything. Or when she's about to say something, somebody else will overshadow her and say it. So I realized that for a long time, she wasn't saying anything, but I knew that this lady was filled with value. So one day, as we're stepping into the meeting, I was like, is there anything I can do to help you today? And she was like, I would like to speak at this meeting. So to Lola's point, in that meeting, at some point, I was like, oh, Victoria hasn't said anything. Do you have something to say? And she went on. And that was the break for her. Because from that time on, every meeting, she always said something, even if it was 1 minute. But she broke the fear of, oh my God, they're not going to allow me to speak. Oh, I don't know what to say. But the day she broke it and she did it, today she's a superstar, presenting, doing everything. So sometimes I think we all have a role to play to help each other, right?
All right, absolutely. We all have a role to play. Thank you so much, Felicia. Again, lots to cover. We do strongly recommend that we want to hear from you. Share your questions through the chat. We want to make this as interactive as possible. We have this great group of panelists. This conversation is very exciting. So please, if you have any questions, please use the chat. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to move on to the next question here. Again, there's a lot to cover here. My next question is for you, Felicia. Felicia, again, we're looking at yourself as a leader, as a vice president at Hudson Bay, with a great deal of focus around diversity and inclusion and the future of women, future of work. What has been the most significant barrier for you in your career? I think, again, looking at someone that's attained the kind of success that you've attained, what has been the most significant barrier for you in your career, which is part one. Part two is, how have you built confidence or resilience over the course of your career to achieve those goals?
Yeah, I would say that the barriers are centered around all the things that we've been discussing. So bias and stereotypes, so sometimes you're working in a group of male, and let's say you're the only female, or let's even say you're the only immigrant, or, you're the only black person in the room. There's just something in the minds of people. Like I said, some of it is unconscious, some of it is conscious. that makes them feel like, oh, you don't have anything to offer. Or where are you coming from? You're coming from Africa. I'm sure they don't even do transformation there. You know, there's some people that are that dim or myopic in the way that they think based on, you know, maybe even their own exposure. They haven't been exposed to the fact that there's great talent in Africa and we're doing, you know, strong and mighty things as well. So you sometimes face those barriers, but goes back to what we said. It's now your responsibility to choose how you manage that, or how you use it as an opportunity to educate or to step up or to raise your voice or to show your value. You know, I always say that responsibility, if you break it down, is responsibility. So you have an ability to respond in a positive way. So when those barriers come, because they will come, because bias is real, because stereotypes are there, I have the ability, and this is how I've been able to overcome. I have the ability to define what value do I bring to the table? How do I showcase this value? And once I start doing that and they see results, you know, you would find that those barriers just begin to melt. Then it means that indirectly you've started inviting yourself to rooms and tables that you naturally wouldn't have been, because you've shown some type of value. I was speaking to a woman recently, and she's maybe on like, I think 7 different boards. And she said until the day that she knew what her value was, and she always placed that value on the table, she was never invited. And when she's not invited, she will knock the door and say, hello, I'm here. I can do X, Y, Z. And then things started changing for her. She didn't have to, she have her value had appreciated to the level where they knew that it was no longer CFA franc. It was a Kuwaiti dinar. So people were fighting for that value. And that's how she kept getting promoted. So, and I've applied that, and I see that it works. In terms of building courage, confidence, and resilience, I've found the role of mentorship is very powerful. I'm in the diversity and inclusion space today, but it didn't start today. It started, I think, about 15 years ago. My mentor at the time was the chief diversity officer of my company. I was nothing in that space. I was, you know, managing director for a few countries, doing some regional work, some global delivery work, nothing to do with diversity and inclusion. But one day she said to me, you know, you will do so well in this space because you have a passion for people. So she showed me a part of myself that I didn't know, you know, so she opened me up to stretch. And then I started looking, and I said, okay, but I don't know how to do it. But then she said, why don't you champion diversity and inclusion in Africa or in Asia within the organization? I'm like, well, how do I do that? They're not doing anything. So I kept looking for excuses and giving excuses, but then she pushed me. And similar to what we said about the other lady who wasn't speaking and started speaking, the day you step on water and you see that your focus and your value does not make you sink, you will try to step on bigger water the next time. So, and that's what happened with building courage. The more you practice, the more you flex your muscle, the stronger you become in that space. And so the power of mentorship has really helped me, because who knew 15 years after, now what she pushed me to do is relevant to me, is beneficial to me. But then at the end of the day, you know, she could have pushed me and I could have still chosen to say, I don't believe in myself, I won't do it, you know, and I wouldn't have done it. And then I wouldn't be where I am today as well. So that goes back to that responsibility. We have the ability to choose positive over negative, or to choose what seems daunting over the simple things in life. They say progress doesn't happen in comfort zones. So most of the time, because of our human nature, we always feel like, don't worry, I'll do this thing tomorrow. No, maybe this is not for me. Then you don't push yourself and then you don't do it, right? So for me, that's what has helped, you know, mentorship, pushing myself, stretching myself. Believe I'm a person of faith, and I believe Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, you know, and so that just keeps me going. That it doesn't matter how big the thing is, and that's where you build resilience from as well.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Felicia. Again, a lot to take away. And I think, you know, again, you're alluding to the fact that there is a great deal of importance when it comes to mentorship, sponsorship, finding people that can encourage you, people that can guide you towards where you need to go, and also believing in yourself and taking that step. And I just put put in a quote in the chat that you said. I think this jumped out to me. The more you practice, the more you flex those muscles, the more comfortable and stronger you are in those areas. I think maybe the first time for myself, first time hosting this PM roundtable, I was a little nervous. Now I'm getting more comfortable. I'm still getting comfortable. I'm still evolving. I think that's the same way as women. When we find ourselves in those rooms, you want to be able to speak up. You want to be able to expand yourself, and eventually it gets more, you get more comfortable in those spaces. Thank you once again, Felicia. We're going to go to you next, and we're switching gears here. Next question is for you, Jyoti. And Jyoti, I think we can talk about self-belief, mentorship, sponsorship, and being our best, but there's also, we have to take it back and talk about self-care, and balance. And so my question to you, Jyoti, is what are some of the ways you stay grounded and take care of yourself? Which is part one. And part two is, how do you balance career, personal life, and your passion? Is there such a thing as balance? Jyoti.
Great question, Olumide. And I think until I recognized what my passion is, I always struggled with balance. The moment I found my passion, magically, I recognized that I could do more with less time. And you may ask how, right? Because one thing I learned from my experience is the moment you start investing time in your passion, you somehow drive the energy that the fulfillment that you get from that time invested in your passion rubs into other areas of your life. I'll give you an example. In my case, for me, I mentioned in my introduction that fitness is one of my passions, and for me, that was a turning point in my life. The capabilities, the self-belief I had prior to pursuing that passion of mine was very different from what I managed, how I managed my time, what I could achieve, how I could balance my personal life, my professional life, and pursue my passion at the same time. It suddenly became clearer to me. And I guess I thought about it, I reflected on it, that how come? Because half of the things used to overwhelm me before. And how come that doesn't happen to me now? And I recognized that the fulfillment I got from the time I invested in staying active, in being active. Because when I started my training in Muay Thai, I spent close to 8 years getting to my brown belt division. And it was a journey. It was not intentional. It was totally something I tried, and I developed interest. And then when I saw progress, I saw success. I went there and I realized that staying active and the passion I developed for it gave me clarity in my thoughts. I became more creative, and it just, I think, and at the end of the day, I derived that it was the fulfillment which was helping me get to that clarity. And therefore, I was able to better manage my time in my professional life. For example, I set boundaries for myself with regards to what does self-care really mean? It doesn't mean you're doing a 9-to-5 job. That's not what self-care means. Self-care means you are setting clear expectations with the people in your professional life, at the same time prioritizing the time you invest towards your passion and your family. And how do you do that? By communicating that what matters to you, what is important to you. Because we typically feel that, if I, as a mom, if I say that, I cannot come to a meeting at 3:00 because I need to go pick up my son, I feel guilty. But then I came to recognize I shouldn't. I'm a mom. I have a son. If I need to go pick up my son at 3 and that time doesn't work, I should be able to communicate that openly. And surprisingly, I realized that guilt was something that I had believed in. When I communicated, the people who were receiving that information had no issues whatsoever. So I think that helped me be bold and courageous I guess the crux of the matter or the message here is that when you invest your time or pursue a passion, whether it's professional or personal, it rubs into other aspects of your life, and you drive that balance and clarity and boundaries, which at the end of the day somehow clear the path for you to drive that balance, to be able to better manage your time and pursue all these aspects at the same time.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jyoti. And I think one thing that people don't pay attention to and that you shared that is really stuck out to me is creating boundaries. Because sometimes we find ourselves taking on so much task, we're chasing, we're juggling so much without necessarily creating time for certain things. You know, there are times when you shut it down. You know, during this period, I'm not taking any meetings. I'm just blocking this time. And I know previously you shared with us around creating time for a project you're working on, a change management strategy. And also, I think recently you and I spoke and you talked about taking some time off spring break. And that's really what it takes, because this thing doesn't stop. And if we don't take care of ourselves, and you know, it's gonna come back and we're not able to perform at the level that we need to perform at. And essentially, we're not able to get the result that we're looking for. So thanks for that, Jyoti. We're gonna go next to Lola. Lola, the next question is for you, Lola. And question is, as a female immigrant working in tech and running a food and beverage brand, how do you successfully navigate both, Lola? Because I know, again, it's interesting because these days, most people that I talk to, you know, you might be a professional in tech, professional in any walk of life. Folks have a side gig. People have other things they're doing. And how do you balance, you know, yourself as a tech professional at the same time you're running this food brand? It's super.
Yeah, it can be really complicated, or I don't want to use the word hard because I enjoy both, but I think creating that balance has to do with just finding a way to prioritize and juggle. I want to show value in my tech job, but I also want to grow my organization and grow my company and make it a brand that is sustainable and growing and be the inspiring brand that it has been so far. So the way I do that is having support. You know, I have, once you have a supportive partner, I think that really helps. And some of you may not know, but Ade is my partner and husband, and he's really supportive when it comes to my business and helping support and cover my back when it comes to my IT job as well. So yes, a lot of I guess I'm in a position where I do have that I would say support in my personal life when it comes to being able to show up or take a break when I can't show up at my tech job, and somebody is there to help cover. I know a lot of us do not have that advantage whereby your boss is your spouse, so you're able to ask for time off and not have to make excuses. But even if your wife has a side gig or has something she's doing, a lot of us culturally as women are still expected to be the homemakers, still expected to take care of the kids, expected to do the, I have friends who work their 9 to 5, still cook at home, still take care of the kids, help with homework, do the school runs, and expected to contribute financially in every way and grow their careers. There's no way that they can do their side gig and also grow within their 9 to 5. There's going to be burnout and there's going to be resentment. So I think supporting your spouse, even if you don't know much about what they're doing, but on trying to understand what it is they're doing. What company are you trying to grow? Oh, wow, this is really interesting. Learn about what they're doing. Learn about their job. Because if you don't know what it takes to do that job or grow that company that they're growing, you can't have empathy. You can't understand the work that it takes. So being involved and trying to encourage as much as possible and taking ownership of certain tasks in the household. and in, as much as you can in different ways so that that woman can have balance, I think is really key for men specifically. And whether you're also whomever you're married to, I know, not everyone may have a male partner, but I guess the key thing is saying a partner. Allyship and partnership is not only reliant on men. If you have a sister, a brother, or a spouse, it doesn't matter if you're same sex. The key thing is having a partner that is an ally. Is really key to you getting that success. And that has been what has helped me create balance. Now, when it comes to me, myself, ownership of me creating balance and taking care, I think it's just realizing the importance of success of both, right? And making sure that my value is felt as much as I can in my IT job, and making sure that it doesn't affect the value that I'm bringing. So my mentorship that I do with Ole Consulting, if I'm on the road, if I'm on the go and one of my mentees requires or needs help, I drop what I'm doing, because at the end of the day, Super's progress is dependent on how fast I decide it's going to grow. So if I feel like, I need to be able to create time for my mentees, or that is a priority for me, I can put a pause. I have control of how I'm running my other business. And so I use that and say, okay, what is a priority at this time? Is a priority this lady or this gentleman who has this job that is going to change their life and change their career more important or less important than what I'm doing right now? I think that is really important. I think the value of being able to inspire people and encourage them to be able to forge further in their career is so important to me that I just prioritize that and say, okay, if I have this other task, I can do it tomorrow. But this interview they're having is happening tomorrow, and I have to prioritize that right now. So I would say it's just making that conscious mental effort. And I sometimes tell myself, Lola, you're creating a food brand. There's something my friend always says, that we have to realize that when we're entrepreneurs, we feel like what we're doing is going to change the world. But it's not. You're not creating this spaceship. You're not flying to, you're not creating a human, or you're not like doing something that is, yes, it's life-changing for me. It's life-changing in an aspect where we're filling a gap and I'm doing something incredible. But really, is it going to change the trajectory of one individual's life that can make them have such an impact in generations to come? I think it's just me telling myself to make that conscious effort to prioritize one wherever it's needed. And it can be hard. It can really be hard, because I have passion for my entrepreneurial journey. And so I think for all of us here today, if you have a side gig, prioritize it, because that is where your passion is. I'm so passionate about Itsupa. I can sleep, breathe Itsupa all day. But I think about the reason and my why for why I am at OLAID. And that why and that reason is what pushes me to put Itsupa aside and create value. So I think focus on your why and make sure that your passion doesn't overtake that why.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Lola. And Lola, we do appreciate you and all that you do at OLAID Consulting. We're very grateful for that. And frankly speaking, I ask myself, how do you juggle both? How do you go about, you have to do all that you have to do with Super and then still be able to find balance and support us at OLAID? I think the key takeaway for me here is having a good support system, be it in your personal life and be it in your corporate life. We spoke about, I think Felicia talked about these women in a group that meetings were being scheduled at a certain time, and those women were often on the road when they're taking on those calls. Having the right support system at work is also extremely important, but then beyond the support system at work, I think in your personal life, having that support system. Now, some of the things that I've learned that help, I think some people struggle. I think you might find a way to navigate the work side, but then at home, how do you find support? I think one of the things that I have learned is finding ways to, whatever goals you're trying to achieve, how do we align with those around us and ensure that it feels like a win for them as well? And whatever goals we're trying to achieve, it doesn't feel like a personal silo goal. It feels like a collective goal. And when it's a collective goal, we're often able to get support. And I think, again, prioritization is key. Prioritize what you want to do, those personal goals, those side gigs, prioritize them. But at the same time, keep in mind, what is your why? Why are you working on that job, and understand that you need to prioritize the things that you need to do to ensure that you're able to find balance. So I think it's again, finding balance is an ongoing exercise because there's so many moving parts. We have to keep juggling and finding ways to navigate. Thank you so much. We are currently getting to the tail end of this roundtable, and we have our final question. Our final question is going to go to all panelists, and it's a two-part question. I love these two-part questions. And I'm going to start with you first, Felicia. The question is, what advice would you give to the next generation of female leaders? And what advice to the next generation of female leaders? And that's part one. Part two of the question is, what are some of the advice? What advice would you give to the young women entering a male-dominated industry or profession? So this is to you first, Felicia.
Yeah, I think my answer to the question applies to both. One is believe in yourself and remind yourself daily that your dreams are valid. So, I mean, I think Ozola that said, well, figure out what your why is. When you know what your why is, and that becomes your motivation and your driver, it doesn't really, in as much as, the things that happen around you would matter or might stall or stop you, make that your driver, and that way you overcome the things around you. But beyond there also is, those things that we've spoken about, identifying people that can support you. I think that's critical because at the end of the day, whether professional or personal, if you don't have that support system, they say that one tree cannot make a forest, right? So at the end of the day, you need, like me, I have a very strong support system in my sister. I'm a single person. So it's not like I have a partner in that sense, but I have partners in many senses. So my sister is one of my partners. There are people that work that are my partners. There are people that are my friends that are my partners. So my advice to the younger generation of women is believe in your dream, find your allies and your supporters and build your network. Push for more. I mean, like you can become everything that you aspire to, but then find those people that would also guide that aspiration. And then balance. You talked about finding balance, and I think beyond there is also deliberately creating balance, and that's where prioritizing self-care becomes very important, because it's very easy in life to get carried away with so many things that we want to do. But until we stop and prioritize self-care and not be guilty about it, because that's another thing. Everybody is running after all these goals and dreams. And then they're like, oh no, I can't stop and take a break or take a vacation or go to do massage. I have to go and do this. I have to go and do that. But they don't realize that you can't pour from an empty cup, whether it's into your life or into the life of the people around you. So that's one thing I have learned. And I would say as an advice is prioritize self-care and don't be guilty about it, And then finally, keep learning, because I believe that the day you stop learning, you start dying. So every single day, aim to learn something new so that you're better today than you are tomorrow. And, they say the sky is not the limit, right? So, yeah, I think that's what I would say to my younger self. Like, keep moving.
Excellent. Well, I think keep learning. I think learning is key, because obviously the more we know, the more comfortable we are in those spaces. And thank you so much, Felicia. Again, there's a lot to unpack here. I see keep learning, prioritize self-care, regardless of what's going on. Believe in yourself, your dreams are valid. I think that belief is key. Thank you so much, Felicia. And before we go, I'm going to go to the next person. Before we go to you, Jyoti, there's a question in the chat, and this is from someone in the audience. It's, how do you deal with unsupportive bosses who passively dismisses you and cuts corners? I'll let you respond to the final to that, and then perhaps if you want to, share your thoughts on the other question.
Is this
You ask me, sorry.
I was going to go to you, Jyoti, and Felicia. Maybe when we do the rounds, if you want to respond to that, that would be great.
So, I think at the end of the day, having a supportive boss is something that I think at the onset of the relationship, you do have a control to a certain extent. But in spite of doing all the right things, being proactive, passionate, showing interest, contributing to the broader team, you do not get that success or support from your boss. I think that the answer lies in what we mentioned earlier, building that network and a group of allies. I think how you contribute towards and getting noticed or showing your value proposition is not just to your boss. It's basically to everybody around you, and it comes down to you building that network or building those allies in your professional community who see the value that you bring to the table, so that if you are in a situation, and I'm talking about worst case scenario, if the boss is not acknowledging, you have 10 other people who stand up and acknowledge. And that the contributions that you've given, you have allies who speak up and support you, which basically helps turn around situations many times. And I've personally experienced this. And it may be, I'm not saying it was intentional, but it was a scenario where there was lack of acknowledgement. And at the end of the day, we as all individuals, we are looking for recognition and acknowledgement to stay motivated. And if you do not get that, whether you see it as lack of support or someone who's not as having your back or promoting you in front of senior leadership, then I think you need to have that network in your professional teams where people are standing up or speaking up or supporting you, so that the value comes forward in other forms other than just your boss being supportive. And in a lot of scenarios, when that happens, it does come across as your boss being successful, because when any team member is bringing value, it is at the end of the day a value from the team, from that department, from that area. And if you put forth the value in a manner that you're contributing towards the team success, you're making a boss successful, you're presenting or putting a positive image or brand for your whole department or area, in such, most of the times it does come around if you do not see that behavior with these actions. And I'm not saying it's a sure shot thing, but it definitely helps influence getting noticed, even if you don't have a supportive boss. Because at the end of the day, yes, your boss is a critical decision maker who will help you promote, but if you have visibility at senior leadership level, then you may have supporters even beyond. And it does help you tomorrow when you are looking for or asking for a career path or progression. You have allies who are supportive for you to get to that next level.
Super. Thank you so much, Jyoti. And I'm not sure if Lola or Felicia want to chime in, but before we go back to the next question, to the actual final question, Lola, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. When I think I've been in situations where, I think most of my career, I would say I've been blessed to have really supportive bosses, but there have been situations where there was a specific situation where I didn't have a supportive boss. And I'm somebody who is a Christian and believes in God, and I just prayed about it. Like, I prayed, meditated on it, and just said, Lord, let if this woman isn't going to be supportive of my growth and is going to continue to question my work when I know that I'm bringing value. And I think it was a situation where she wasn't bringing as much value, and so she was projecting that on me. I just said, Lord, like, just figure it out for me. She suddenly just moved to Vancouver, to another state, and had to leave. And I'm like, woohoo, like, you know, so sometimes pray on it, like miracles do happen. Another thing I would say is, like Jyoti said, keep trying to prove your value. Your boss is not or your lead is not the only one in the team watching. So don't rely on the value of your input or whatever you're bringing to the table be dependent on what your boss says, because your boss usually has a boss. And without putting your boss under the table, find ways to connect with other people, other managers in other departments, network, and make a play to leave that situation if that situation is not progressing, because it can affect you mentally, emotionally, and you can take that home, put it on your kids, and put that pressure on that, you know, situation in places that don't need to, and it can affect you. And you come home and you're talking about it. I remember then I used to come home and talk to my husband about that boss all the time. And it was like, you know, it was something, it was a thing. And so you have to be able to remove yourself from that situation. But in order to do that, you have to network. You have to continue to prove and show value, so that even when it comes to, like, if you have to leave that organization and go to another organization or get promoted to another department within that, it's not necessarily dependent on your boss making that decision or giving you a reference, because you have provided and shown value to other managers or other departments or other projects in the organization. So find the way to make a play, to have a plan B exit, you know, and just pray on it, I would say, is a key thing. Now, what I would say to answer, just since I'm talking now, to also answer that other question about, you know, how I would say, what I would say to my young self, or also what I would say to young women, you know, trying to grow their career, I would say, believe in yourself. A lot of times, the things that I cried about, the things that I worried about, one way or the other, as long as I continue to focus on my why and my career and continue to learn, as Felicia said, continue to learn daily, and those problems resolve themselves. A lot of things I worried and cried about when are no longer issues. I have different issues now. Those issues are, you know, there's that saying they always say, remember the time you used to pray for what you have right now. A lot of those things I used to worry about, the fact that I continue to focus on my goals and focus on my career and continue to learn and continue to seek for what is the next thing. I have never been somebody who is very comfortable about being complacent. So I am not satisfied with just being here and saying, oh, okay, I'm here right now. Complacency doesn't necessarily mean I have to go start a business. It doesn't mean everybody has to leave their 9 to 5. But like Jyoti, she's successful in her career, but she's also successful as somebody who is a coach in fitness and also progressing herself, and mentally, physically, and all that. It helps her in every part in her career. So it doesn't mean that you have to go do this other side gig. But complacency just means that what other multidimensional way are you improving yourself and your life? So I would say that a lot of things that I worried about when I was younger, the fact that I continue to grow and continue to not take just the crumbs that are offered to me, and continue to raise my hand, continue to make sure that I'm progressing, continue to make sure that I'm mentoring people, continue to make sure that I'm learning from people that could be younger than me, older than me. And the most recent thing that I have learned, for many years, I was on LinkedIn. I wasn't using it really. I just had my picture there. But one thing I will tell you guys, specifically when it comes to my other career, which is also you know, professional career as well, I have gotten so many mentors. Your boss, your leader in the company where you work, do not limit yourself to that. Network on LinkedIn, professional boards, network, find ways to meet with other women, find ways to put yourself out there. there are so many ways where you can get mentors, and mentors do not have to be physical people. They could be books. Like Felicia said, you can read books, you can listen to podcasts. I get so much encouragement from listening to podcasts that are in food and beverage world, because there are not many people that look like me in that industry. There are not many women, there are not many Black women. I can count on my hands how many Black women are in that industry. So I get a lot of mentorship from people that I've never seen. And so I would say that those are some of the things that I would say to encourage people who are starting their careers right now, and what I would have said to myself when I was younger as well.
Well, thank you so much, Lola. And I know, Jyoti, you didn't get a chance to answer the other question. I'm not sure if Felicia wants to comment on the question around the boss, and then we'll give you the last. Felicia,
yeah, Jyoti and Lola have said it so well. At the end of the day, it goes back to that: what's the value of your currency that we talked about earlier? So you have to create value for your brand, and then it won't matter what your boss thinks or doesn't think. And I'm not saying that to say ignore your boss. Your boss still has a role to play, at least in your current role. But the more value you can show across board, and then the more you can tap into the power of networking, the better positioned you are to not be limited by one person. I think it was Lola that said it, today you are in this one company, does not mean that you're going to die in that company. So, you can create your value across board and find that there's a bigger opportunity for you somewhere else. But if you never created that value because you kept yourself under one boss that you felt was the be-all of your career, then you won't have that opportunity when it shows up, right? So I would say that, I can't say much more than Jyoti and Lola has already said. They nailed that question. And it's very important also because sometimes power dynamics change. I once had a boss that really, really loved me, promoted me, showed me out. And then once the chief diversity officer, who was way, way higher than him in another country, started showing liking to me, that dynamic changed. This guy who was always showcasing me was now looking for ways to say, I don't know my job. What are you even doing? But because I was able to have built equity and created value beyond him, when the time came for people to speak to me in rooms where I wasn't, there were people that had a voice for me. And somehow, with or without him, I still progressed. But that was because that conscious effort to build the value of my currency had already gone ahead. But you can imagine if I was just saying, oh, this guy really likes me, there's no need, this will take me everywhere I want to go, then I would have been maybe not in a good position when that happened.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Felicia. We're gonna circle back to Jyoti for the final question. And Jyoti, the final question is, what advice would you give the next generation of female leaders? Part one. Part two is, what advice would you give to young women that are entering a male-dominated industry or profession?
I think it comes down to three things for me, and this is based on my own learnings and experiences and some things that I have touched on already. Three key takeaways would be starting with self-awareness, recognizing you are aware of exactly where your strengths lie, where your opportunities to grow lie, seeking help where you know you need help, and having that opportunity to assess your own biases or your both conscious and unconscious. So I think number one is self-awareness. Number two is building allies. And that is something I have learned, that all of us need allies to reach our potential. There's something that I reflect back on, and I wish I had recognized sooner in my career, not only just career, even in my personal life, is having allies, a group of people who support me, with whom I can be myself, with whom I can ask for an honest opinion, feedback, people who stand up for me and support, and people who look out for you, basically. And that applies both in your professional and personal life. And having that network of people with whom you build that rapport and relationship, whom you can fall back on, any scenario, even the scenario we just touched on, that if you do not have a supportive boss, then that's where I think you leverage to get to where you want to get to, whether in your current role or pursuing whatever that future opportunity looks like. So build allies always, professionally and personally. And last but not the least, don't wait to be invited. And I think my punchline would be invite yourself to the table. Do not wait to be asked in every scenario.
Okay, all right, super. Well, thank you so much, Jyoti. Thank you, Lola. Thank you, Felicia. This has been a powerful, powerful session.
Adi, sorry to cut you off. I think there was a question that may have been missed. Yeah, from Dotun, I believe, and I think one from Abby Peters.
I know that, and unfortunately, we're out of time right now.
Oh, okay.
We'd love to get to those questions. Again, there's a lot to unpack. We would love to get to all those questions. Again, I would like to thank the panelists. Thank you, Lola. Thank you, Felicia and Jyoti. Again, there's a lot to take away. We will be back here next month for the next PM Roundtable. We'll hope that we can circle back. We hope that we can address your questions, Abby and Dotun, at the next PM Roundtable. Again, key takeaways for me is believing in yourself. Having that support system is key. Prioritization is also very important because you need to have so many goals. We need to prioritize. Self-care is important. Again, there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to take away. Mentors are key. Sponsors are key. Look beyond your organization. Read books. You can find mentors in books. Create value for yourself. Understand your value. Create value beyond your immediate boss, because there are others watching, there are others listening, and that value you create for yourself speaks volume. Again, self-awareness. Thank you, Jyoti. Again, invite yourself. Don't wait to be invited. Again, this has been a very powerful session. I'd like to thank all the panelists and all the participants of today's PM Roundtable. We would love to hear from you. Ole Consulting, what we do, we're a management consulting firm. We specialize in IT professional services, provide staffing, training, and employment placement services. We'd love to hear from you. Follow us on Instagram, follow us on social media platform, LinkedIn, Twitter, all these different social media platforms. If you have any questions, you want to reach out to us, you can contact us on info@oleconsulting.com. For folks that want to listen to this recording, you can access it on our Facebook Live. This session is currently being recorded on Facebook Live, and we would love to hear from you once again. Again, our mandate for the PM Roundtable is to build leaders, and we certainly hope that today's roundtable has helped us in promoting that mandate. So again, thank you once again to all the panelists, and thank you to the participants for joining us today. We will, on behalf of the Ole Consulting team, we wish you well, stay safe, be well, and bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Mm-hmm.